All right, should we get started?
Oh, let's do it.
You ready?
I think so, yeah.
You can start the hour then. We can just get going. So, well, good. So, well, hopefully you know a little bit more about us after last week's. I can't believe it was only Friday. It almost feels like it was.
It does seem like a long time
Yes.
ago, right?
But we have 15. Yes, we have 15 questions for you today. So hopefully just an hour's worth again, similar to what it was on Friday. But yeah, otherwise we'll jump in. I know it's going to be random again from different board members, and we wish you luck. So
Thank you.
okay.
I don't need this, do I?
So we are going to be. It's
Are you
going to be
recording
recorded
it?
today.
Okay, so then I'll make
So
sure. All right,
microphone will
sorry.
be needed today. So.
Okay.
All right, I'll get kicked off here. So, part of the New Prague Way is committing to excellence. As superintendent, it'll be a large part of your responsibilities. In your first 2 years, what are your top 3 goals to deliver excellence? What benchmarks or measurable goals will you use to determine your success? Please be specific.
Hey, thanks. It's an interesting question because as I continue to dig deeper this weekend, for example, into your strategic plan, I just kind of unpacked that a little bit and asking some of those same questions, right? Like we have the strategic plan there, and then some of the same questions for me was, well, how are you measuring that? What is the plan to deliver on that? Like how is this operational? Was a plan that I had. And so some of the things that I had thought about, right, was we need to be delivering on what we say these are, and what would that look like? And so in the first 2 years, top 3 goals, to deliver on that, I think that, I can give globally, that would be something I think as a team that we would be collaborating a little bit on, right? But we need to look at the delivery on academic excellence. I think you call it evaluate. No, that's this system. Continuous improvement of student supports and facilitate continuous evolution of learning through, right? So then let's get specific on that as what are those goals around that? And I would want to be looking, and so you have in there what measurable goals. Before I could set that, I want to look at that data, right? I've taken as much of a look as you can off of like your World's Best Workforce report from this year. And so, I have some questions around like where we're hitting the market reading, right? And not only what our gaps are there, but is there some decline in that, especially in the early years? And so are we meeting our needs there? So I think you would want to have a goal around making sure state goal is all of our readers are reading at grade level by 3rd grade. I think that's an important goal. And then we'd want to have some specifics around that. You also have a high graduation rate, right? But a place of question that I'm wondering about is when we look at the ACT scores of high school ready, that tells a little different story. And again, it'd be super presumptuous of me to try and assume what that is, but I think it's a question that we would want to unpack in collaboration with the high school, in collaboration with teaching and learning, and those factors, and say it's one thing to graduate from New Prague, but are we ready for that next step? Those are really 2 different questions. And so I think it would be important to have a goal, and again, that's still an academic goal, but a goal around that as well, on how are we making sure. Then you also have the operational excellence on here, evaluate and improve the district's operational systems. So we'd want a goal around operational excellence and what that looks like. I think some of that would be around the fiscal responsibility piece, right? And so not only are we passing a levy and what is that levy on, but then how are we continuing to look at our demographics? So I was looking for and didn't see, but what's our demographics telling us? 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, are we planning for those, and what does that tell us about operational? So are we continuing to see, I know we've talked about a decline in enrollment because of COVID. A question I have is, are we sure that that's because of COVID, or do we have any other factors playing in there, right? And so we want to have a goal around whether that goal is around how do we keep and retain these families, like what is our, I was talking to Mr. Boothie, why am I drawing up Tim? No. Tony. I've known him for a while. I'm going to do that. It's been a long day, so you got to give me old timers here. But Tony, and it sounds like open enrollment, we're getting more in than we are out. But there's just some data around those type of things that I want to see, so we know, is our enrollment continuing to decrease? And if so, is our budget and our fiscal, are we planning accordingly to that as our income, right? And how do we bring that back up or make sure we maintain? And as I think I said to this group on Friday, people vote with their feet. And so What is the product that we're creating here in New Prague to make sure people want to come to school here, that are not only in our boundaries, but also how do we attract those that aren't? And I've come from districts that had to do that work, and that's the new reality of education. I think there's an appropriate way to do that, and maybe I've been a part of places that wasn't so appropriate. But we do want to create a product that people want. So I think of some goals around that, so I know I'm not being really super specific on that, but I need more data before I could give you specific goals. And then, what benchmarks or measurable goal will you use? I think on those achievement ones, you're looking at that test data, whether it's and I'm more, whether it's the FAST data, whether it's your ACT data. Yes, we have MCAs, but MCAs are more systems data, so we'd be looking at that data to see, is our curriculum doing what we think it's supposed to be doing and meeting the standards? It's not student data, right? So we'd want to be using a measurement that is student data there. I think the other question has been, what is the student experience here? And you have that on your mission statement on that Y chart, like, are kids feeling safe, our communities? I think you need a goal around that. Right? So are we continuing to serve the community? Are they continuing to be happy with? And I'd want to see the percentages around that. And so are 100% of our kids saying they feel safe and included in our schools, or is it 87%? What might we do to raise that and then monitor that goal? Is our community saying they feel like, there was a question, let's use that one as an example, on our school board hears our needs, right? And so then what would we do maybe to see, and how would we get that better? So I think, any of those goals that we would set would need to be ones I just need a lot more data on, but I think those are your categories, and it lines up with that strategic plan that you've already established.
Thank you.
You bet.
How would you deal with issues where there appears to be no consensus between board members?
It's a good question, Mark. I think, so everybody agreeing? Consensus, or getting to a?
I would say at least 6.
I think one of the things that I have questions around, you guys asked a really good question. Well, I've watched the board meetings, right? So it's no secret where we're at right now, and so we won't make it one. But one of the questions I have that you asked me that was really good, and I'm not sure I nailed it, or I had to follow up with, and that was, what do I need from a board? How do we communicate with each other? And one of the questions I have is, what do you see as the role of the board? Right? And how do you interact with the superintendent in your public, and how do we appear in public, and all of those things? And so I think one of the ways we deal with that is to do some work on the front end before we can't be operating out of conflict mode all the time. We need to be operating out of, again, a mutual respect, right? We need to be operating out of a similar goal. I believe all of you are serving because you want what's best for New Prague schools. You may have different opinions on what that is, but if we can stay grounded in that reason for serving, that we want what's best for all of our students. Let's work from there. And then we have 2 new board members, I believe, that haven't been through maybe some of the work that whether team works or with, the school board association around, right? You'd have a new superintendent. I think it'd be really important to do some of that work on what is the school board's job in governance, what is the superintendent's job, what is leadership job, how do we all get along, how are we going to understand that. I also think it's really important that we try our best to come to some of that conversations before the TVs and mics are rolling, right? Like, how are we presenting ourselves to those who are asked, to those that are watching? Right? I think that's important work. I think we need to have honest conversations about it if we're not getting along. Is there some past healing that needs to happen? Is there not? But at the end of the day, Mark, we may not reach consensus all the time, right? I think, again, that's okay too, as long as we're being respectful in that space, and as long as we're hearing and listening to each other, and as long as we're staying focused. And I think it does come back to those really strong strategic plan and roadmaps and how we're measuring it, is, does this serve us at that space? And so, and again, I think it's just, also building trust and relationships with all of you, and being able to, I think you've already seen some of that, just call it what it is, right? Not everybody's gonna probably come here and say, I've watched your board meetings, I know that it's not a secret, right? And so let's have conversations around that.
Yep, thank you.
That help, Mark? Okay.
Special education is an important component of our education program. How will you manage special education costs while still meeting student needs? Yeah,
boy, those unfunded mandates are killing us. So right now I'm going to for one, keep my fingers crossed that the legislature helps us out a little bit on this right now and finally starts to fund some of those unfunded mandates. So special education, and that's where it's tricky, is there are some really specific mandates and rules and expectations that you have to follow that there's no choice in. So you have to do that work. It's not an either or, and those are our students, again, keeping students at the center. Those are our students who have specialized needs, and so we need to make sure that we're supporting them in that way. So I think also, though, you can be looking at everything. You're always looking at how do we get more efficient at that role. So as I was out in the elementary buildings, for example, today, is it that we have programs for students in every building and we value that home, everybody getting to go to their home school? Do we need to think about, would we be better off in clustering? So like those are things that that I don't have answers for at all at this point, but I think you can always be looking to see, is there any way that we can do this in a more efficient or cost-effective way? But special ed funding is a challenge for all of our schools that we're going to continue to struggle with. And you're asking then how I'm meeting management as well, still meeting student needs, yeah. And if you're talking about specialized students' needs and meeting their needs through, special education cost, again, it's just what are the IEP needs, the plans that we have in place, and we've got to meet those needs with those dollars. And so, again, it's really understanding what those IEP needs are as well, and that we struggle with that. Just spent about 20 minutes on that today at work too, with a student, for example, that wants to be part of our summer school program, but that would need to come with a para that he gets during the regular school session, right? Summer school doesn't provide for that. So now you have to make a decision around, is this an experience we think this child should have? And if so, then how are we going to fund that when we can't use special education dollars? And again, for me, it comes back to what's best for the student, if we can just stay centered on that. Sounds simple, but it really does guide your work if you're anchored into that. You bet.
Describe your leadership style, including methods you have used to gather input, resolve conflicts, and make difficult decisions.
Yeah, I think I've alluded to this in a couple of different places, that I am somebody that likes to do just that, Dan, is gather input, right, and get a lot of different perspectives, so it allows me the opportunity to make sure that I'm not making a Dana decision just on my own interest or my own input, but I've got a lot of people's input. Depending on what the situation is, am I gathering that input informally? Am I gathering that formally, right? Am I having a conversation, giving a call, hey, what do you think? Am I surveying? Am I sending out an email? Like, how am I getting, who am I asking, and how am I getting at that information? What have I used in the past? All of that, right? Whether it was leading a building, whether it's right now looking at our middle level program. I think I talked a little bit about that on Friday. Like, what do parents want from that? Is it meeting our needs? Do they want a fourth middle school? Do they not want a fourth middle school? Is it helping do our teachers feel like we're doing the work? So I gathered that data both through survey and then sitting down and having conversations so you could dig deeper into what that satellite data level wouldn't give us. And again, as far as resolving conflicts, it's hearing, people want to be heard, right? So it's trying to get at hearing what are the two sides and seeing if we can find some common ground around that. I generally find that often we can, right? And then what can we agree to a step moving forward from there? In most hope that we would both mutually agree to. If that's not the case, then honestly, then that comes down to making the decisions. And I think the most important thing I do when making a difficult decision is I understand my why, right? And I'm able to speak to that why. Like, here's what I've done, here's what I've gathered, here's the decision I'm going to make. And I'm very transparent about why I'm making it, so that even if you don't agree, you know why, right? And you know what to expect, and you can count on that. Right? And again, you're all not always going to agree. We may not always agree, but you're going to understand the work that went into it, who had input into that, and the why. And then there's that feedback loop, I think, that's always there too, on watching to see, well, how did that decision play out? And is there anything that we need to monitor and adjust? And that is an important piece that, while it's not asked in here, I think that's also a piece, is being willing to have that feedback loop, watch and see if that's going, and being able to admit if you didn't get it right and make that adjustment in the space as well.
Thank you.
You bet.
Please share with us how you would determine if the school district is meeting the needs of all students in the school district. All in caps.
All in caps, yeah. Again, I think that's one of those where that's got multi-prongs to that decision, to that question, right? Because you have I'm going to keep referring to this, but there's this, it's been just really impactful book. It's called Levels of Data. We talk about it a lot. And so there's what we call satellite, map, and street, right? And I think when you're looking at are we meeting the needs of all students, I need to gather data from all of those places. So satellite would be like your standardized test information, right? It's that high level, maybe it's a one-shot thing, it gives us a look. Street level would be maybe it's like in the building, right? From the buildings, what are they maybe surveying with students? What are they talking to? What are our principals saying? It's at that level. And then the street level is when I get in there and have individual conversations with students. It's me with parents. So, for example, just over at the community forum, we heard, I think, from a couple parents who would say that we didn't meet the needs of their child, right? And so that's some street level data. I don't know that a test score would have told me that, and I don't know that even a building might have known that, but I'm hearing that, right? And so then how do we go back and say, well, is there a way that we could better meet that need? So I think you have to make sure that you're watching all levels of that data and gathering it from every space. Also making sure that our students have a voice in that. Again, I come back to some of the work you did with Teamworks, and there's feelings about how students are feeling about they're in there, and are we getting that information? Because you always want to make sure that we may as adults think we're meeting the needs of each and every, but what are our students telling us? And we, in my current role, we survey from early childhood all the way through graduation. You know, we do it differently with a 4-year-old than we do with a senior, but it's really been valuable information to that student experience on what are our students telling us about places where they see us not meeting their needs, right? But what I do like about the question is that it is, Kim, in all caps, because that really is the work, is to make sure that we're meeting the needs of each and every student. That's ultimately the work, right? So.
Thank you.
You bet.
A parent of an Indigenous student calls you to report that the student is being harassed in school. You are the first person to be contacted by the parent. What steps would you take in dealing with the parent? What if the parent first goes to a school board member? What would you do in your dealings with this school board member?
So starting with, what would I do if the parent called me directly? I think first and foremost, always, whether it's you hearing from a parent or me hearing from a parent, you have to listen, right? I think it's really important. What I would not want to do is say, well, have you talked to the building where it's at? Click, right? Now, that's going to be a part of the coaching I'm going to do, right? Because we really do, having been a principal, we want some of those questions to start at the building level to make sure, same with you, to make sure they're not kind of jumping through. But at the same time, parents need to be heard. So the first thing I would do is be very respectful and listen. This is somebody's prized possession, their child. And so they deserve my ear and my time and my listening. And then I would say, can I do some homework on this? Have you talked to the child's school? And maybe it's going to be, well, that hasn't worked before, or that has, or then can I do some homework, right? It's never something that you want to have like a quick reaction, because you want to, again, gather all that data, right? So this is the parent's experience and the parent's position. May find out in the building and more than likely there's a lot of other pieces that I'm not getting from the parent, and so we want to gather all that. Ultimately, we try and resolve those issues at the point of contact, where the parent is going to be the most. So in this case, if it's, the student is being harassed at school and they're in some school, we wanted that to start at that school level. So I might get back, if the parent can't, I would get back in touch with that building and try to figure out, hey, I've got a parent call, this is what they're saying, and then see how we work that out. Is it, what don't I know? Do you need help? Do you want to contact the parent? Should I contact the parent? What are we doing? And some of it, again, depends on what is this level of harassment. I mean, is it something we need to intervene right now? Was there harm? Right? Do we have a situation of harm? Then we need to be responsive right now. So there may be times where my role is much quicker or much deeper, depending on the level of that. I think what we want from a school board member is, again, I want you to listen, but it in that role of governance, it's not yours to solve or to, reach. I would want you to reach out to me, right? And say, I had this parent, can you follow up on this? And then you would expect me to get back to you, right? With, yep, Denny, and here's I'm going to get a hold of Brad at the middle school, find out what's going on, and I will get back to you and thank you. So again, we want parents to to access our school board, but we don't want our school board in that managing of that behavior, right? And so we want them to give that to the experts who are in the building to do, and then expect that follow-up like that.
Thank you.
That.
Dana, to what degree should community input impact changes to curriculum and school policies? What specific steps would you take?
I kind of got maybe two different things going on there a little bit, but our curriculum is largely driven by our state standards, right? And so we need to make sure that we're meeting those state standards and that we select curriculum that meets that need. I need to dig deeper into what our process is here. Most schools have some type of curriculum review, implementation cycle. I'm assuming New Prague is no different. I think where the community involvement comes in, like for example, in my current role, I have a parent advisory council, right? So they do bring questions there. They can ask, I keep them informed, like this is the curriculum we're looking at for our science or whatever. But the decision is we have people in place to make those decisions on what is the curriculum we're picking for that, right? I need to trust the experts that are in that positions. As far as, again though, impacting change, a parent does have a right to know what their child is learning, to know the curriculum, right? Have access to it, to see it. And if it's not something they want for their child, we need to provide a different avenue for that learning because we're beholden to those standards. So curriculum is just a way we get at those standards. And it is, again, decided at a district level. But I think there is some places for parents to have input into, that might not be what I want. So as a middle school person, that was often around, our 8th grade health curriculum, specifically when we got to, sex ed or whatever. And you certainly had parents that was just not, they wanted to know what we were teaching at that point in 8th grade. And some would say, okay, I'm fine with that. And some would say others not. And then we just made some other arrangements for that, or a way to get at the learning. And that certainly worked. In my current position, we're dealing with this in some of the courses even that we have. And again, it's what's required, what's not required, what are some things we have in our English language arts curriculum. We've taken a stance on certain books we will not allow in that space, specifically ones that, for example, have the N-word as a required reading. We're not going to have that in our schools anymore. So we have some parents that probably are not okay with that, but that's just a position as a district we've taken to honor all of our learners, and that's a district level decision in that.
So your district would not allow Huck Finn?
As a required reading in the class, no.
Okay.
And again, as a required reading in the class, right? It's definitely in our media centers as a choice option, but it's not something we would subject students in the classroom out loud reading or yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And again, that's not how all districts would have it. That's the one I'm in, that's how we're doing it. And then as far as, again, policy is set by the board. And so really the community's input in how those policies are set is happening right here. They voted you in. I think they can, again, come and have thoughts about that and give you feedback, and we need to listen to that. But policy is something that, along with administration, is set at a board level.
Thank you.
You bet.
All right. If you woke up tomorrow and you had the opportunity to create a school system from scratch, and this is something that I've thought about as being an armchair, educator, this is something I've thought about. So, what would it look like? So, nothing's off the table. Instructional delivery changes, calendar, community involvement, and then what steps would you take to turn that vision into a reality here at New Prague?
Wow, that's a really fun question. And, if you've been in education long, you fantasize about this, so I'm glad you're joining in that. And some of that would be, in all honesty, in a small way, I had that opportunity when I was in Farmington. We were moving to an ALC, and I was asked to be the director of that and take that on. We really were building it from the ground up. And so I think it has some of those key components. And then as a principal at Eastern Carver at Pioneer Ridge, we did a lot of work around personalized learning, and I saw some of the best learning I've ever seen. So but you said to dream, so I'm going to dream. Just I understand that, and then we have the reality. But really, the focus is on learning, right? And on the individual and how students get there. So the school that I would develop would have that be the driving force. And what I mean by that is that students would have a voice in how they get to that learning. So if you think about, and we take off these bumpers of it has to happen in this age group chunk of time, right? So if I asked you, when did your child learn how to ride a bike, or when did they learn how to walk, there would be a plethora of opportunity. We don't say it has to happen at this time. We know so much about learning in the brain, but we kind of sometimes don't use that very well, which sounds really counterproductive, right? Like we're in a business of teaching and learning, but we don't use always what we know about teaching and learning. So I would want us to focus on what we know about how people learn and build a system around that. Okay, so at the early learning area, it would be, at those early years, would be a lot of hands-on exploration, students being able to move and hit benchmarks as they hit them, not necessarily because if a student's ready to start school, they start. If they're not, we just continue to really, it's about making that system ready for where the student is at and moving them forward. So again, lots of hands-on opportunity, play, just how that brain naturally works. As we get more to that middle level in high school, I'd want to, again, turn back to what is the learning. I do away with grades, and I know that could be really controversial. What I have seen in our grades is that our parents and so forth think there's something that they're not. They really don't report on student learning. They report on a whole lot of other things. So I would build a system around that focused on learning. We can talk about behaviors in a different way and focus on that, but I'd really want it to be. And again, when I was a principal at Pioneer Ridge, I saw some of that happen, where we did eliminate grades at our middle level, and we allowed students, there was every day formative in Somerset, we took the bells off, so you didn't move in 45-minute locks. Our students started out in a daily circle. Teachers had used the formative information they had from the night before to create offerings that were really in response to students. Students could ask, hey, I need more information on X, and teachers did that. You could do it in small groups. Maybe a student could say, I could lead that. We had that all, and it was like this daily schedule that moved. And then students signed up for where they were going to be, and they moved throughout their day in response to that. So they got what they needed when they needed. So I think about, for example, my own son going through school, setting 50 minutes in a math classroom when he had it in the first 10, 15 minutes. Why am I, and that's what I'd hear, and I think that's sometimes why we lose some of our high school kids, right? It's like, why am I sitting here? And I think we've seen that coming back from COVID, right? Like, I was able to get this, so why are you making me sit here? So some of those bumpers around time, and that we measure it by time in the seat, really focused on learning. Again, a lot more flexibility in my day, a lot more student voice. And a focus on the standards. So if I'm supposed to learn X, let me show you how I know that, right? I also want to know, what are we going to need? So I think it's exciting that we're getting back to some of the CTE work again. I think I'm old now, so I'm starting to say this has come back around. But what's exciting about that is it's giving kids hands-on real-life experiences to explore, so they have a better idea of what it is they're going to. I could go on and on about this calendar, community involvement. I think communities are partners, right? Again, at the alternative level, we did a lot of this. So I take a student, for example, that had failed English 11 like 3 times, right? So we're going to keep putting him in and do the same thing and wonder why he's not getting it. So problem number 1. Came over to the alternative school, and we looked at the standards, and then we learned about what he was. Well, his dad owned the local repair shop. He was very much a car, gears, oils, like that was his jam. And so we took the standards and went to Popular Mechanic and some of the how to rebuild an engine. It was way above me, right? And that's how we got at those standards, right? Like, he could understand how to write a paragraph. He could understand how to draw a conclusion. He could understand the author's intent through something he was interested in, and then show us that learning, right? And that kid fired up in our alternative schools. This kid who was failing, right? And then we have to establish the why, the age-old question, why am I learning this? And so you talk about, well, what do you want to do? I want to own my dad's shop. Okay, so you want to own the shop. Do you think you're going to need to know math? Do you think it would be nice if you understood employment law? Do you think it would all those things? And we hooked in because that was his passion, and we used the learning to support that passion. And when I was still living in Farming, he now owns like 3 auto body or, repair shops in that area, and it's super exciting. And that was a student that I think in a very traditional system we'd have lost, and we didn't need to lose him. So again, I could talk about this forever. And then, how do you make that vision happen. I think you need to have that vision, right, and turn it into, and then what are the things that we can control in, and you do have to, what I saw fail when I was at Eastern Carver and we were doing the standards-based learning, and again, it was some of the best learning we ever had, but where we failed is we didn't bring our community along with us tightly enough. So there wasn't an understanding about this grades, and then there's these other systems that get in the way, like GPA and college apps and all these things, right? So we need to do a better job of bringing our community along. We need to do a better job of making systemic changes throughout. And maybe I'll be in it long enough to see some of that happen. But I think even within our current system, if we can lead from where a student voice is and students, we can make it okay even within a graded system and a Carnegie unit and sitting in the seat, we can still listen to student voice in that space and empower them to control some more of their learning. We can do that.
All right, thank you.
You bet. Sorry, I could go on and on. That was
No,
a
you're
great
good.
question.
Describe your expertise with Minnesota school finance. Share strategies you have used to make financial projections and revenue calculations. When should the budget building process begin?
Thanks. Yeah, so I think I talked about this a little bit of time. Obviously, having not been a superintendent, I haven't run the whole budget myself, but I've had the opportunity in both Eastern Carver and more so now in Wayzata as an executive member where I sit at the table with those decisions. As far as the process so you said share strategies to make financial projections. I think I shared some of those is we do need to make long-range financial. We need to know how many students we have, right? We generate our revenue by our kids, right? And so I think that's where, how do we make a long-range forecast based on our demographic enrollment data? So have we done that research? Have we had somebody come in and do that study? What are they saying our enrollment is at? We have to get our handle on what do we think is going to be coming in, right? We need to be working with, and that usually when they come in, they'll talk to you about, what are the homes being built? How many lots have been sold? How many permits have been pulled? All that stuff is really essential to a school because that helps us know who we may have coming in. What is our open enrollment data out? How many kids do we have going to online learning? Like we need to gather all that data because that helps us make our financial projection because that's where we get our money from, right? So one of the strategies I do is to make sure that we have that, right? That's our incoming and use that in our calculation. We want to make sure we're keeping that healthy fund balance. We're dipped a little bit, right? And so we want to make sure we get that back up there. So what are adjustments that we need to be making in this time? As far as when should that budget process, I think unfortunately, and Sandy probably doesn't want me to say this, but I don't know that it ends, right? Because you're always in that budget mode on what did we have come in, did we hit our mark? Because you make so much of it off of projection, like we think this is where our enrollment's going to be, we're going to staff it at that. Then we should be looking really quickly at those October numbers and say, did we hit mark or didn't we? If we didn't, what adjustments might we need to be making, right? Make those adjustments and then continue to monitor. And then you're already in the spring looking at that next year's budget. Unfortunately, you should be making that budget about now, right? And I know that you're always watching what's happening at St. Paul, but unfortunately, we're not going to know that, right? And so, some of the things I have is I'm conservative on fiscal responsibility. I really want to be careful. Again, we're stewards of our taxpayers' dollars. So one of the things I'm curious about, for example, is what are you basing this year's budget on when we don't know? We're hearing great things out of St. Paul right now, but they're not realizations right now. And so are we budgeting on what the governor says might happen? Do we budget on a more conservative approach and say, okay, 2 and 2 that's what they normally get, or are we going to do 4 and 2? Like, what are we going to do with that? So that's something I think you're always working really closely too with anybody in the legislature who can give some handles on that, or your area superintendents and finance. Sandy will be a great resource for that. Like, what are they saying? That's all part of that process. Watching where else and working with Sandy on, there were some questions I had. I think you sold off some bonds or something. There was some money that dipped in there. So where is that? So you're always watching all of those pieces. So again, I know enough about it to know all the pieces. I haven't done all those pieces, but I've definitely been a part of the whole needing to make some shifts in our in where we're at financially. Working with you all, what is the fund balance you want to maintain that you're comfortable at? I think I heard 8% maybe, and we're below that. So what do we do?
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Please share strategies you would use to pass a local operating referendum. What role would you play? What role should a school board member play?
So let's answer that in part first. We should all play a critical role in this. I think everybody in the district with an interest in the district has to play a critical role in this. As I think, I'm starting, all my groups I've met with are starting to run together, so I apologize if I said the same thing, but referendums are honestly not passed by you or me, or superintendent and board. They're passed at the 1319, and because you've got, somebody from the school there and people are asking, so they're passed by the paraprofessional, the bartender. You have to have everybody in a school being extremely knowledgeable. So some of the work of my role, and as far as I should be leading that work, but I should be doing that in collaboration with you and the other team members, the other directors, finance, our principals. And we need to establish what it is we're going to go out for, and then we need a plan around going out for that. We need to gather information from our public first. So if we think about this current one, rather than kind of talking in generalities, do we have some ideas around why? Why did it fail? Who didn't vote for it? What are they telling us? Have we done some work around? Do we have any demographic information on that? Do we have any, again, coming back to street level, who have we talked to? What didn't they hear? Over the weekend, I just started asking questions to people I knew, and I think I shared it at the open forum, but I heard, or maybe it wasn't there, it was with the admin, I don't know, but I heard there was a street sign at the high school. It's like, we voted no for, a street sign, but that might have been with somebody. So then where did we miss some communication about that? We have to own where it is that we can get better because we didn't pass it, right? Did we make the case big enough for the need, right? Did we ask for too much? Was it too much? Did they feel like it was too much? Did we ask too many questions at once? We got to get some answers to that, and then we have to plan from there, right? And so I can tell you some of the things that I've been a part of that we've done that I saw really helpful. After a failed referendum in Easter and Carver, one of the things our superintendent did was he did bring all the administrators in and said, okay, every building's going to have a team. Your job is who are your parents that are connectors, right? Who do you have in your building, both teachers, and make a plan for your building on how we're going to get the word out, right? Because it really is about communication. And so we did things like, I then had my building team who became it was my job as a building principal to make sure that my building team was very well versed. I had parents there, and then their job to sign up for how will you get that information out. We had teachers and parents doing these driveway, come grab a Coke or a soda or whatever and talk about the referendum in the driveway, right? It was that boots on the ground type of work. It means that I need to get out and have one of you at least with me at every possible space where our community leaders are at. So how am I building that collaboration? Because it's not just our role. Good schools, and you have to sell that, right? But good schools mean good community. Right? Whether you want to go as simple as your house. So if this school doing well helps me if that house I own out on Cedar Lake, right? Because that value holds, it helps that. So we all have a vested interest in this. So how do we get our mayors and our city council and all that? How do we get them at the table with us? How are they knowledgeable of that? How do we get to every single group that we can think of and in the businesses? It really is, it's all about communication, and you have to be very strategic in how you do that and how we tell our story. So. Yeah.
Thank you.
What are the top 3 emerging issues in public education that the school district will face in the next 3 years, and how would you address them?
Top 3 emerging issues. Well, I think obviously the financial piece is going to continue to be an emergent issue, and not only the current COVID recovery from the financial issues in the budgets, but that are we responsible to the dollars that are being given, because there's going to be some that are going to feel really strongly about if the state does give us more money, what are we doing with those? And so how are we responsible fiscal stewards of that, and how do we get that word out? How do we show that there's good return on a taxpayer investment? Right? I think one of the issues in Minnesota public education is how we fund our schools at the capital level. Is the funding formula that we have working, right? We have the cross subsidies, we have inflationary, we have all those pieces fitting in, and does that work not only, and in Minnesota it's unique not only for the 7 metro area, but for outstate, if you will. So I think that's a huge issue. The call it what you want achievement opportunity, that not all of our students are meeting our mark, is a huge issue in public education. We just cannot be okay saying, well, 75% of our kids are meeting all of our standards where we want, because what you're really saying is 25% aren't. And I don't care if it's 90% are meaning 10% aren't. And you want your kid to be one of those 10%, because I don't want mine to be that, right? And so I think that's and how we close that gap, because we haven't done it yet, and it's the same. I mean, it's not new, right? And so what does that really look like, and how do we do that? I think that's a huge issue. So the finances and how we do that across the board, both at a national level and at a state level. Watching, I'm from Iowa, watching some of the stuff that's unfolding there on how public education is being funded. I think that's an issue that we're going to have to wrestle with. It hasn't hit us here in Minnesota, and I hope it doesn't, but it could. And so that's an issue we're going to have to wrestle with, and that's really a return on our investment. And then the closing the achievement gap being the second one, and then I think being relevant is really the third one, right? And so what did we learn? What can be the gifts that COVID in education gave us? And how do we adapt to that? We're not going to be able to continue to do education the way that we have done it, like you had it, like I had it, and be successful. We're already seeing, in talking to our high school folks, signs of that, right? Students in the second semester opting into online courses. We lose funding when they do that, right? So we need to find out why that's happening. So I do think we're going to have to continue to wrestle with what makes us relevant. And that fits into, Matt, your question, or the CTE question I've been asked. That's all about how do we make sure that we're relevant and meeting students with what they need and keeping up with what the future needs. And maybe that's a bigger issue on how do we create learners, not students. And what I mean by that is we don't know what our kids need to know. We can't teach them what they need to know, maybe besides literacy, because it's ever evolving. So we need to teach them how to learn and how to engage in that, so that they can be critical thinkers, so they can adapt to different situations. That's the learning. And how are we going to do that in a public school setting? I think that's going to be a challenge for us. So I think I probably hit more than 3, but.
What are the top 3 reasons you are pursuing the new Prague superintendency?
Yeah, thanks. So I had this nice list that I started out with that. I have these brainstorms, and I thought about giving, but I'm like, no. I think I don't know that I saw myself on this trajectory, or maybe I've been trying to outrun it given my family history. But so I'm not out looking to become a superintendent right now. I have a really good job that I love. With good people and good friends, and I haven't been there long enough to get everything done that I was hoping, and you probably never are, but why I'm pursuing in New Prague is because it is an opportunity to give back to the community I live in, and that's important to me. I kind of come from a service leadership background. I like that. I like the feel of being at things that are part of the community. I enjoy being at the football game, or I enjoy that piece. So this is just an opportunity to give back in that way. So that's one way, one reason. I also believe this is a strong system. I have heard, no matter who I asked this weekend, or, I read, again, those different levels of data. I read your survey data on, you surveyed, or probably Harold and them did, on what do you want out of a superintendent, what are our strengths and what are our concerns. I've read that. And if you read what the strengths are, overwhelmingly you hear good teachers, good administrators, good facilities. If you have those, you've really got it, right? Because the 2 biggest levers, principals and teachers. So this is a strong system, but can continue to get better, right, and serve the needs of this. And I believe I have skills and sets that can make that happen, that can help lead that forward, so that we are, so that proud tradition part stays, right, and that we have our people here. I think also that living here, I'm aware of some of the situations that have happened in New Prague, and that's not who we are, right? And it's not enough to say that's not who we are, because it obviously was. Like that kind of stuff happened, but how do we do that here in our community, and how do we do that in a way that doesn't need to be so divisive? And I think I have experiences that can bring that. I think because it matters, because I live here and I have family here, that matters. And so that's really about where it's at. Again, I'm not looking to job hop or, use this as a stepping stone. I'm getting old, I'm getting tired. I just think this would be a wonderful opportunity to collectively have an impact on the community I live in and that I have chosen to retire in. I bought my retirement home here. I'm stuck, so I think it would be a great opportunity to just know I've made it a better place collectively and go out on that. So, yeah,
Thank you.
you bet.
Dana, if second chances were possible, what are 2 or 3 decisions that you have made that you would do differently in your professional life?
I'm glad you added that in your professional life there, Denny. Like,
We
woo,
don't
that's,
we don't want it personal. No, nothing personal.
ooh, boy. Yeah. Let's see. Second chances, 2 or 3 decisions you've made that you would do differently in your professional life. You know, one that comes to mind is as a principal at Pioneer Ridge, as our demographics were changing. I don't think I moved that work fast or deeply enough at the time. I don't think I recognized soon enough what was happening. And I thought I was at a better position to lead that work than I was. I didn't understand enough about myself to lead that work in a way that if I could go back and do it now, having learned more, that I would do. And because of that, students were harmed, right? That meant I wasn't part of a building then that was good enough, right, for some of our students. And so I would have reached out sooner, I would have recognized it sooner, and I would have brought in help and support sooner, right? Though that would have been something I would do differently. There are always those students that stick with you, right? That maybe I made a decision around behavior that I wish I would have done differently. And when I say that, I have a personal story, if you will. I lost a student this year to gun violence in Minneapolis. And Jeremiah will be my purpose for good because of the gifts he made. But I wish, and again, it kind of comes back to not doing enough when we did it, but this was a young man with extreme talent and extreme gifts. And I wish I would have done more to keep him in school, right? I mean, oftentimes what happens is we make it through middle school, and then when they get to the high school, as a middle school, we kind of wash our hands, and then that's theirs. And while I looped back in, and it was very much a part of my life, like what could I have done differently to have kept him in school and saw that value? And I really, again, it comes back to your question sooner, and your question is, he didn't see himself in it. He didn't see himself relevant in that. And I wish I would have done more to help him see that relevancy, right, or that connection, and that will haunt me. And, you know, if I was to think, too, I can go back to being a teacher. I just feel like I should probably go back to that first class I had a long, long time ago and just apologize because, man, you're just not real good at the beginning, you know? And so I think about knowing what I know about grading and learning. You know, I had the good old, you probably saw your teachers, right, the grade book with their points, and I averaged. And I remember keeping a kid from walking across the stage as a teacher. In Iowa, I taught seniors government. It was the last class they had to pass. And I'll never forget Trent, because Trent didn't pass my class. And he didn't pass that class because he cheated at the end on a test, and so I zeroed it. Okay? That meant he didn't pass the class. If he didn't pass, that meant he was short credit, so he couldn't walk across the stage. That was their policy. And so he had to take summer school and eventually graduate, right? And that's not unheard of, but I stayed firm on that, right? A new teacher, and I stayed really firm on that. And I look back on that, and that was really bad on a whole lot of levels, right? You should never, what was his purpose for cheating, right? A zero, that doesn't support anybody. What did he learn? He learned that somebody wasn't compassionate about their situation, right? Mom and dad was coming in and crying, and and I remember the principal asking me if I was sure, and I was about this academic integrity, and this was just bad. right? And so, a funny story is I had saw Trent, because like I don't even want to tell you how old these kids are now, but I apologized, and he just started laughing like, "What is no big deal?" But more important was to his mom and his grandparents, and and his reaction was, well, it was kind of a kick in the butt that maybe I needed, and I didn't get something, but it didn't need to be that way. And I think I've just really carried myself with that. That wasn't student-centered. It's probably more me-centered, if I'm being really honest, right? It was system-centered. It wasn't student-centered. So but that one just sticks with me. And again, it's been a long time ago. I've been doing this a long time. So, yeah, I think those are the ones that jump out right away.
Thank you for.
Great question,
sharing.
yeah.
Some consider New Prague a rural community, some consider it a metro community. What challenges and opportunities do these conflicting viewpoints present for you?
Yeah. I think that's just it, is that this is an opportunity. So I think we need to be aware of that here. So it's kind of, I'll just use Jordan as example because it's not my, right? I lived until moving out here in Jordan and raised both my kids there. I lived there about 20 years. I will never be a Jordanite, right? There's some of that in New Prague, right? Like there's New Prague and you've lived here all your life. And so it's hard not to see New Prague as you've always seen New Prague, which is this quaint little rural community. However, you also have exploded, right, at different times, but you've built a lot of new homes, you've had a lot of new spaces, and so you're not the same old New Prague that folks remember. That's, vast farmland and all that. Like that has changed. And so it's finding the sweet spot. So how do you hold on to and celebrate? That's what makes us different. So what do we have that maybe a Shakopee or a Lakeville can't have? We do have that small town feel, right? We're going to say we're going to know you. I call it the Cheers philosophy. We're going to know everybody's going to know your name. Right? And in our buildings, everybody's going to know that. I walked through that building with Brad today, and he called every single kid that came up on us by name, right? I couldn't do that at Pioneer Ridge, right? And so, maybe he's just better with names, but he was really good at it. So I think we can celebrate the pieces of both of those worlds, right? Like this is a rural community. People are highly invested. That's why when you go to the football game, the stands are full, right? That's when I was at the wrestling on this last weekend, that it was full cheering on that team. I can tell you that's not what I see in Wayzata or Eastern Carver, right? And so we can sell that experience, but we also have to be aware of what do our students need, as I've alluded to succeed, and how do we make sure that our system has risen to that need so that we don't stay so like unaware or rural in that. So I think there's an opportunity to, to really embrace and celebrate that. And you're right, as far as challenges go, I think some of that challenges is that people want to hold on to the New Prague they knew, right? And they don't want those outsiders changing it, right? And so how do we bring that together? And a school is the perfect place to do that. But again, I think it comes back to your referendum. It comes back to everything. Are we telling our story and our why? Like this work, right? Are we sharing this and knowing this so that whether you're rural, how do people see themselves in this, right? That's the work that needs to be done, and that crosses whether we're rural or whether we're metro or not. And the nice thing about it is out here too is that you can be both, right? I like it out here. I love being out at my space. I leave the metro every day, and I drive out here, and some people think I'm driving out, off the face of the earth to come out here, and that's what I like, right? It's quiet and there's solitude, and I can escape that, but I also have it in my backyard. So I think part of that is celebrating the benefits of both, and leveraging that as a sales point that will keep our enrollments up and keep it. So instead of trying to argue are we this or are we that, how about yep, we are both, right? And how do we use both of those to leverage excellence here?
Thanks.
Yep.
I have the last question. I'm going to adapt it a little bit, so it's not going to be written exactly or said.
Okay.
I want to leave it more open-ended.
Okay.
So what do you want to be known for?
I think, one, I'd want to be known for people trusting and knowing who I am. Like, she's authentic, right? Like, I can go, and Dana is who Dana says she's going to be, and she has the best interest of the school, so that she left at a better place than when she came, right? I want to be somebody that's known that, like, she's approachable. Just go, catch her at the store or catch her in the office. She's going to be approachable, because I really am that person, right? I'm pretty much what you see is kind of what you get. And so I guess I just really want to be, that took New Prague to another level and continued to make it better while still honoring what it was. it's no secret, like, right, like, there's a little generational thing happening here, right? What was interesting to me since I've come and gone through this interview process is the number of people that stopped and asked me about my dad. He was here 2 years. That's what I want to be known for, not because we would not agree on everything by any stretch of the imagination. You can just imagine what that sounds like sometimes. But I think he did that. I think for people coming, he left it a better place. He left an impression. And he did that because he was honest and integrity and did the work and believed in it. And that's, that's what I aspire to be, and that's the lessons I've learned. And that's what you would be, that's what you get. You wouldn't be getting a ditto, because no, we are not at all. But those deeper lessons of character and integrity and trust, and I was writing on lessons learned from, and it's just be straight up with people. They want the truth. Don't sugarcoat it, even if it's not what they want to hear, right? Like, be honest and be approachable. Don't be afraid. No job is beneath you. Like, those are the grounding pieces that I was raised on and built on, and that's who I am, and that's how I'd want to be known. I go to.
All right, thanks for sharing that.
That.
All right, I think that concludes all of our questions for the night, or else anybody, I don't think there's any other
Dana, do you have
prepared.
any more for us?
Yeah.
You've been talking the whole time.
I know, right? Woo. I don't think so right now. Like I said, some of the things that I have that are coming around is just, I took this. Is this where you got with Teamworks? Like, this is there? Okay. So I think, just what I did then to just kind of tell, kind of give you a thought in my brain is I just broke that down. And I didn't prepare it to hand it to you, because sometimes that can be a bit much, and I want a lot more thinking around that. That's that deep thinker. But, just breaking down, so when we say engage and support our communities through opportunities for high learning, like, that's our core purpose. And so breaking that down on how do we engage students, right? What does engagement at high levels of learning look like? Who are our communities, right? How are we engaging then in learning our students, our staff, our parents, our community, our board? Right, like, that's just those are some questions I had. Define high levels of learning. So I think Matt, it was your question on how you're going to do it. What's that satellite map and street level data? How are we measuring and reporting on this? Right. When I looked at the vision, what we intend to create, it was to be a premier school district that models excellence and prepares our students for life's opportunities. And so I just asked him, so what do we mean by a premier school district? If I asked all of you, what does a premier school district look like? It's in your strategic plan. What is your vision for that? Because then it's my job to carry that vision out. Do we have that? Do we know what that is? My current superintendent, I've learned a lot from him. One of the things he reads a lot, and sometimes when he hands another book, it's like, oh, not another one. But one of his is a market leader example. Like, you can't be everything to all people, but you can be the very best at what you commit to being. Right? And so what is that you want in that premier part is a question I had. When you talk about modeling excellence, what is that and how are you measuring that? Are you talking fiscally? Are you talking curriculum-wise? Are you talking, like, what does that mean? And then prepares our students for life opportunities. And I'm just curious, what do we think that is? Right? Like, what do we want them to? And I wrote down here, and it was interesting, I wrote, what's our profile of a new Prague graduate? And it was interesting today being with the two assistant principals. Nicole is out. It was the same thing. They said, like, we really need to be working on who we want our graduates to be. What is that profile? What is it we want them to know, do, be able to do? When people see somebody that they say, that's a new Prague graduate, right? And what is that? And so that's the, I think some of the unpacking, like, how do you unpack this and make it actionable? Right, and I really see that's the work, and I could go on to the other one, to the rest of the document, but I think this is great, and I think I guess what I want to leave you is I think there's a lot of good start and more work here, and that's the work I'd want to be doing. So I don't want you to answer all those questions right now, but those are just the the wonderings. But those are just, I think, if I was to be hired, some conversations, I guess, is what I'm saying, that I would want us to engage in, right? And what are we anchoring to? We have, I think, Kim, you had asked me, had I seen the strategic vision and read it. I thought I had, but as it turned out, it wasn't this. It was the one with the new Prague Way and the four. And so, you know, I'm just wondering, like, what do you want to anchor in? There's a lot of really good work, but how is that leading into action? And what is it you want to anchor in? And do we have a lot of those? And maybe that fed into the referendum or whatever. I think those are some conversations, which gives you a little insight into how I do operate. Is like, I have questions, and then let's unpack that, and let's talk, and then let's make a plan from there. So if I'm fortunate enough to be selected as your next superintendent, then I will bombard you with those questions and get to the answer. I think too, Matt, the one question on your 100 days, I started that plan, right? I'm like, okay, go with a 100-day plan. But anybody tells you, like, it needs to be a lot of look, listen, and learn, right? I talked to a couple teachers that this weekend, like, well, you know, we're really worried about this new superintendent, like, what changes and whatever. I'm like, well, a really good superintendent's not huge changes, right? It's really about look, listening, and learn, and responding to what the needs are, and then gradually saying, okay, what are some of those changes that collectively, and it's putting that work. Teamwork is great. So now how do we actualize that work? So I think, you know, that's what you could expect from me, and I'm excited to do that. That's like, you know, I'm kind of a nerd that way, but unpacking all that and making that happen is exciting to me. And so if I'm given that opportunity, that would be exciting work. So,
Thank you.
you bet.
All right, sounds good.
Awesome.
Thank you very
Awesome.
much.
Whew.
A long
Thank
day
you.
for you, so.
It was a long day. It was very, you know, it was very informational and a great learning experience. So I do wish you the best of luck in your decision. And again, because I live here, I want you to make the right decision. And if that's not me, then I'll trust that it was somebody that can do even better work with my tax dollars too. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks you
Dana.
very much.
Thank you, Dana.
All right, do you want to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and start the regular meeting?
You
So,
betcha.
please note all members are present. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we're going to kick off here with the spotlight on success with the Shark Tank presentation. Come on up.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Schutte, and I am an English teacher at New Prague High School. And this is my co-teacher, Jane Dittberner, and she teaches business at the high school. We are here to share some information about a unique program that we offer at New Prague High School, and it's referred to as MARS. And MARS stands for Mastering Academic and Real-World Skills. This current school year is our 7th year of offering the program, and we currently have 4 courses under the program of MARS. We have Business, we have Healthcare 1, Healthcare 2, and we also have an Intro to Education course. Jane and I teach the Business one. The MARS program prepares students for careers by teaching academic content through the lens of a specific professional field. We meet at First Bank and Trust, and students engage in real-world experiences with curriculum taking a business focus. We have many pillars of the course, so we incorporate soft skills, instruction, and assessment. We also have a mentorship program where we partner our students with local business professionals. We invite guest instructors to come in on a weekly basis, and we just had a guest instructor today with a human resources background. She spoke about resumes and interviewing with our students. Then we also take site visits. So we already had one site visit this semester. We were here in town at Nick Slavic Painting and Restoration. So we got to visit his company. And then our next site visit, we are working on going to By the Yard in Jordan. And then we also try to incorporate any real world experiences into the class. So that could be discussing the news. We have the resume building piece, like very much something that the students can take with them after they leave our course. And then we also have a really cool project near the end of the semester, which is our Shark Tank project, which Jane will talk a little bit about.
So this is like the culminating project, but we do start it pretty early into the semester, so the students work on it throughout the semester. They do some financial considerations, they look at competition, they have to come up with a unique idea that has not been even thought of, or an enhancement of a product that's currently on the market. So I have the pleasure of introducing our two students this year who won our competition, Sophia Metzdorf and Savannah Smith, and they are here to deliver their Shark Tank pitch to you.
We have the music too.
You have the music.
Okay.
Hi Sharks, I'm Savannah,
And I'm Sophia.
and we are the founders of Eat Easy, adaptive dishware for the elderly.
Sharks, we are asking for a $100,000 investment with a 15% equity in our company. This money will go to advertisement and marketing to make sure our product is seen, and as well as product development and a prototype to make sure that our product is the best that it can be.
You may be thinking, why is this product so important? And that's because 8 million, or 1 out of 15 seniors in the United States are facing the epidemic of senior hunger. With where we are today, that number is way too high. We're aware that difficulty eating is one of the many causes of senior hunger. However, it's still really important. Our product aims to lower that number and to better the lives of elderly people in the United States.
I have personal experience with this problem because I have an aunt, Vicky, who struggles with MS. This means that she has less control over her arms than most of us do. So, our product is for people like my Aunt Vicky who rely on others to help them at mealtime, and this product will help them make mealtime a little bit simpler and a little bit easier, and allow for more freedom and more independence during the mealtime process.
Like Sophia, I also have a personal connection to this issue. About a year ago, I worked as a PCA, or a personal care assistant, and one of my main responsibilities was to make sure that my patient got enough food each day. And there was 2 things that I saw that made this process difficult. First of all was that my patient was weak due to physical issues, and that meant that they had a hard time getting the food from the bowl to their mouth. A lot of the time it would fall out, sometimes they just couldn't do it. Another issue that was really hard for them was that, like many other elderly people in the United States, they were seated back while they were eating, and that made it difficult for my patient to see into the bowl and to see the food. And like Sophia mentioned, our product would address these 2 issues, and it would be something great for any elderly person in the United States.
So Sharks, here's a prototype of our product. But this isn't exact because our product has a few differences that make it better.
Our first feature is a silicone ring at the bottom of the bowl that will stop it from moving around or sliding around.
The second feature is a slanted inside that will allow an elderly person who is seated or reclined back in a chair to be able to see their food better and to make eating a lot easier.
And our final feature is a curved lip, which will keep the food inside of the bowl if it does get pushed around.
Sharks, here's a cost breakdown of our product. As you can see, it's only $10. $10 to make it mealtime easier for all the elderly people in your lives. $10 to make the problem of senior hunger reduce. And as you can see, we have a 40% profit margin. That means for every bowl we sell, 40% of that will come back to us and our company and to you as investors.
Now you may be thinking something like this has to be out there, and it is. However, our main competitor, Elder Depot, has 2 faults that make us superior to it. First one being website design. As you can see, this is a screenshot of Elder Depot's website. And first of all, it's not very user-friendly, and second of all, it's not very pleasing to look at. Especially for an elderly person who may not be super savvy with technology, it could be very difficult to use a website like this, and it could be difficult for a head of a nursing home in order to buy bulk product. Another fault with their company is design. Our product has different features that make it stand out from Elder Depot and make it superior.
Sharks, another reason you should invest in our company is because, as you can see here, our demographic is only growing. By 2050, almost 25% of the U.S. population will be considered elderly. This means that our bowl will only sell more sales, as well as become more useful and important as time goes on. So an investment now is a good plan for the future.
And what makes us different with our demographic is that we're not just focusing on the entire elderly population in the United States. We're primarily focusing on nursing homes. And as you look around, or as you just drive down the highway, you can see that there is no lack of nursing homes. Just like the population, it is also projected to grow. So like Sophia said, as the nursing home population increases, so will our sales.
So Sharks, are you ready to pick up your forks?
And dig into these deals.
Wow. That was
So,
fabulous.
yeah, I was going to say, where can I get one? I need to get one for Tim. So,
I'll chip in.
no, I had the privilege of being one of the judges for these, and it was a really hard decision. There was 20, right? 20? I think 20 different teams, and I know you guys knocked it out of the park. And one thing I really enjoyed about what you guys offered was just the fact that it wasn't just like in your world, it wasn't like a thing that's affecting your day-to-day. It was like you were thinking outside of the box and saying, like, how can we solve an issue that is truly out there and for people that's not yourself. So I really appreciated that, which is why I know you guys rose to the top when we were judging. So any questions from anybody else here? Anything? Okay. All right. Thanks a lot. We appreciate it.
All right, for
Good
coming.
job.
Hold it 1 second. Sophia and Savannah, we got a little Trojan present for you, and then we'll give you a picture taken.
The plastic.
I don't want to be in that.
Yeah. Just sit back there. And he does a pretty good job zooming in.
That's right there.
Very much.
All right. Moving on to the next item on the agenda here is open forum. We have one open forum item here. We have Laura Call, and she would like to discuss or comment on the open forum policy. Welcome.
I am here tonight to ask members of the board to vote no to the proposed changes to the open forum. I understand the need to limit time and how many individuals are allowed to speak. No one wants to sit for hours on open forum. There's too much to do. I am asking that you not require individuals to email by noon the day of open forum, as well as the submitting of a brief summary on what they plan to speak on. This is one step closer to eliminating open forum altogether, which was actually suggested at a previous board meeting. It was suggested because board members were tired of parents wanting to get their 5 minutes of fame and tired of coming under scrutiny. The impression many of us have been getting is that the board doesn't care what students, parents, and staff think. You have proven that time and again. I feel that many of you have already turned your ears off and will continue to ignore my comments tonight. Just as you have in emails, conversations, and previous open forums. Emailing by noon the day of and requiring a brief summary is the beginning of restricting free speech and having concerned voices heard. Yes, we currently provide a brief summary when we come to the meeting to speak. I can only guess that the reason for the email is to decide whether or not we will be allowed to speak. That was also brought up at a previous meeting. I've had board members refuse to meet with me. I've had board members call me a conspiracy theorist and a liar, having provided evidence of my concerns. Unfortunately, this is the only forum for me to bring to light your negligence and flippancy towards our concerns. You've already proven that in the way of budget cuts. We all know they are coming, but instead of caring for students and staff, you refuse to even consider or ask questions. When one board member asked that the board takes a 10% pay cut to help offset the budget cuts and show that you are with us. It seems that you care for yourselves more than you care for the needs of our district. Or maybe you do care, but you don't see the mistakes that you are making or the damage that it is doing. I want to work with you. Students, staff, and parents want to work with you, but you do not seem to want to work with us. Please vote no to the amended policy, or at least table it and have an open discussion with us. Show us you want to work with us. Your actions are speaking a lot louder than your words right now. I will end with this quote I found. I do not know who the author is, but I feel it speaks volumes. Sometimes your freedom is not taken away at gunpoint, but instead it is done one piece of paper at a time. One seemingly meaningless rule at a time. One small silencing at a time. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I'll respond to that in the sense that, obviously we've had I know there's been some changes over the last, of course, I've only been chair for about 2 months now. And I think I disagree in the sense that, that we've been, disregarding comments and things like that. And if we have, I want to apologize, because I know that the steps that I've been taking as board chair is to make sure that we are hearing those issues. One thing that I've changed right off the bat was bringing policies to the table and making sure that we're discussing those. So I hope people that are listening, or people that are concerned, is that we are trying to bring those things to the table, and we are trying to make sure we are discussing those items open to the public. And then just to address your comments about changing the policy, I think we had open discussion regarding this policy on 2 meetings on two different occasions, and I think the reasoning for me personally, and I think I've stated this before, for wanting to have that comment period, or making sure we have notice by noon, is truly because we really do want to make sure those issues are addressed. Because if it just comes to the table and we don't understand, we don't know where this is coming from, I don't feel like we can really truly get to those issues. And I want to be able to help parents and get them to steer to the right people. And so that is my reasoning for adding that to the policy, in which I think others have felt the same way. And but no, thank you for coming and speaking. So not right now, no. So thank you. All right, let's move to I'll entertain a motion to the approval of the agenda.
Moved.
Second.
Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. All right, next on the agenda is the consent agenda. I know that we did have some items pulled out based upon request from Dan, so we did pull some of those items out. So, but I think everything else in there is good. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
No move.
Second.
Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. All right, board committee reports. First off is Kim on the policy committee.
Yeah, there's just a handful of them, and they were either matched up with MSBA's policy or the administration's approval.
Okay. Any ones in particular that anybody wants to take note of? Because these are all the, yeah.
I have a couple of questions. if
Sure,
I may.
go ahead.
Under the 513 Stool Promotion Retention Program, you guys want to try to find that?
513.1,
513,
that one.
okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure it's, yeah.
It is.
It says 513 on it.
It says testing out of courses.
No, it says student promotion, retention, and program design. Am I in the wrong spot?
Maybe?
It's there.
It's like a subtopic.
Student promotion, retention, and program.
Okay, go ahead.
It says under B, under 2B, it says retention of a student may be considered when professional staff and parents feel that it is in best interest of the student. Physical development, maturity, and emotional factors shall be considered as a scholastic achievement. The superintendent's decision shall be final. So the first sentence says the retention of a student may be considered when professional staff and parents feel. Both of them have to feel that. But then the last sentence says it's a superintendent's final decision. If the staff member and the parents can't come to a mutual decision, is that when it goes to the superintendent's desk? Do you understand the question?
I don't. I was searching for this,
Yeah,
but
I can't find the policy.
I found it now. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong spot. So we were looking at the consent, at least I was looking at the consent agenda
And it's-
policies.
And where is it?
And so it's under the board review.
Did I bring that up too soon?
Board review?
Nope, you're at the right spot.
You're in the right spot. I
So
got it now.
which section of the,
Under general statement of policy, letter B.
okay.
Retention of a student may be considered when professional staff and parents feel that it is in the best interest of the student. Physical development, maturity, and emotional factors shall be considered as well as scholastic achievement. But then the last sentence says the superintendent's decision shall be final. So if the professional staff and the parents don't agree, then it goes to the superintendent's desk. Does professional staff mean principal in there too, and counselor in there too, and things like that? Or does that just mean the teacher and the parents disagree and then it goes automatically, it jumps to the superintendent's desk?
I mean, I guess I would like to think that it would all minister, we would go to principal and all professional staff, not just necessarily, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
So do you want to call that out, retention?
It's professional staff, I just want to make sure that means all the different levels before it hits the superintendent's desk.
I think that's gonna be that's almost.
That's
Given?
That's
Yeah.
assumed that,
Okay.
all professional staff would be all all.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and could this come up? Yes, it could. Has it come up in 10 years I've been here? No, but
Sure.
it could.
Yeah.
So if the parents don't feel that the student should be retained, but the professional staff does, and they can't agree, then it comes to your desk.
Yep.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
you would make that final decision, one way or the other.
Yep.
Okay. I had one more.
513.
There was also one on early enrollment. Did I try to find it? Maybe that was in the consent agenda. That's okay. That's all I got.
Any other questions or comments on any of the items that are in the policy committee update? I think we pulled a couple of out, so I think we'll be talking about later under the action items. So, all right. So Southwest Metro, Denny.
Yes, we had our organizational meeting in January, and it was a good routine meeting. We're off to a good start for the calendar year, and everything went well.
Okay.
And then for CPAC, we had our first meeting in January, and it was a virtual meeting, attended pretty well by several parents. The main thing that we talked about was having a parent night where they could get some information about things that are on their minds, kind of some good ideas that could come from maybe an author or some other person that's noted in the field of special needs. And they have agreed to hire a person that'll come and do a presentation for them, I believe in the month of March, I believe it is. And we'll be doing it in connection with Jordan and several other districts as well. So it'll be several districts that'll be working on this presentation, author and a parent of a special needs child.
Okay. Thank you. Community ed?
No.
Okay. Legislative committee. I know, Dan, you went to the Capitol, right?
Yeah, I spent a day at the Capitol, meeting with members of the House and Senate. The goal was to, there's a lot of money slushing around for education, so the goal was to try to encourage them to direct it into some of the areas that would benefit our rural area. We were only able to meet with members of the Republican caucus, though, which limited some of our influence a little bit. The general consensus that they gave us was that they were having trouble having any influence on committee, and so I'm not very certain with how much fruit that particular trip's going to bear, since all of them felt like they had very little input currently in this legislative session. So.
Okay. All right. Early Childhood Community Coalition.
Yeah, we met via Zoom, and I didn't bring my notes tonight. I had them here last week.
Well, we'll hold you to next time.
Okay.
Joint Powers Committee.
We haven't met since the last time.
Nothing. Okay. All right. Good. Superintendent Interview.
Okay. We'll start out with some really good news. Obviously, the gymnastics team last week won the state title in the AA, the big division, and that was exciting. Congratulations to the team and head coach Daryl Christensen and Doug Amundsen, the assistant, and Ann Niedermeyer too. They've do a phenomenal job, and we got this great girl. It was just very exciting. It was at Roy Wilkins Auditorium, and I think it's been 10 years since we last won a state title in gymnastics. So it's just a program that perennially is very strong, and they do a great job. So that was exciting. We also had the wrestling team win the sections, defeating Watertown Mare, and that was a very exciting match. And they got the number 2 seed. So they wrestle Thursday is the team part, 11 o'clock. They'll start wrestling. They win, I believe it's 1 o'clock, and then 7 o'clock is the championship. But they got the number 2 seed. So they got their chances, and they also had 5. Then individuals be Friday, Saturday, and they got 5 individuals. 10th grader Lawson Aller, and the rest are seniors. Joy Novak, Colton Bornholt, Evan Farley, and then Coy Biskins, if you want to watch a wrestler, I mean, they're all very good, but Coy's ranked number 1 in the nation. And just a great kid. All of them are great kids, and it's just fun to see. Dan Wagner, the head coach, got voted section coach of the year, and Nick Schenecker is assistant coach of the year. And then also, we're pleased to announce this next weekend, we got the boys swim and diving state meet. This is the second year of varsity for us, and we've got a relay team of Brendan Ponka, Alex Dvorak, William Siri, and Jacob Bezic that qualified in the 200 free, 200 and 400 relays, I'm sorry. And anyway, and then Brendan also qualified in he placed first in the 200 free and second in the 100 fly, and Jacob Bezic was second in the 50 free and second in the 500 free. So it's really exciting being the second year of the program, how that's developed. And lastly, we've got girls basketball section play starting Tuesday at St. Peter, and then boys hockey to go to state on Wednesday. They play Northfield again to go on to state, whether or not they go. They played them last year and beat them, and we'll see what happens this year. So we're hopeful. And then I'm sure we need to talk about the snow day today for elementary, which was a big surprise. When I got the call I can't remember what time the call, it was 7 o'clock, 7:30, but we had 4 buses get stuck on the rural roads. Denny, you live on one of the bad roads.
I live on a bad road.
You live on a bad road. Yeah, remember, most of our, the routes are on gravel roads. People forget that. It's not on pavement, and, well over a fourth of our students live on gravel roads. But, yeah, we had 4 buses. We got 1 out right away. The 3 came in a lot later, and it just was not a safe situation. We had reports of cars sliding down into the ditches. We just, we got the secondary there, but we did not feel good about the safety for our elementary students. Tried a 2-hour release, went out and drove the roads. It was terrible, and so I know other districts had the same problem, but it was a surprise, and so we ended up having a blended learning day for elementary, and then even with that, we couldn't go on the gravel roads, so middle school and high school If they didn't have their own car, they had to get picked up at the middle school. So,
Are we feeling good about tomorrow morning?
according to my transportation people, they said yes.
Okay.
But I've learned a long time ago, you just never know. So that's where we're at.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Next on the agenda is an update on the Climate Task Force. I know they had their last meeting this last month, and Tony's here to speak about that.
Good evening, School Board and Superintendent Dittburner. Thank you for having us here tonight. We had this scheduled for a couple weeks ago, and there's a lot of agenda items, so we moved on tonight. To my left, District Equity Coordinator Tremaine Fulton and Anna Shalene, high school senior. So what I would like to do tonight is just simply kind of just cover a little bit about what the Community Task Force was about and some of the things that we talked about, and then how we're just continue to keep moving forward in the school and potentially in the community also. So we had 3 action steps approximately 1 year ago by Superintendent Dittburner, and a lot of our administration, and we've been working very hard, both people within the school and outside the school. One of those things was to create a school district climate task force, which we'll be addressing tonight, to provide staff with professional development and resources to support our students, and then also to work on leadership of our students in the athletics, fine arts, and activities area. So why create a community task force? And again, like I said, approximately 1 year ago is when this work started, this meaningful work, and that was to help us change the school district culture. So I would like to thank publicly here at the school board meeting the 25 plus people who were part of that. We originally had scheduled 3 meetings last spring. I believe it was April, May, and June. And then we took the summer off. And then we came back again right around the November, December, January time frame. And we had a little bit of bad weather where we had to bounce a meeting or 2 a little bit later. But we had 25 people from 5 different areas. We had students, we had staff, we had parents, we had community, and all of those folks came from all different dynamics, and were just a lot of fun to meet and to get to know. We actually had a couple school board members here, Denny Avlicek and Mark Bartushik, and the 3 of us, of course, sat on the board along with Superintendent Dittburner. So some of the things just focused on shared experience from our members. We worked to eliminate hate speech and racial remarks, and those were the reasons why we wanted to put the community task force together, to get people's thoughts and ideas, and then discuss how to develop empathy and provide an inclusive and welcoming environment for all persons. So at this time, Mr. Fulton is just going to kind of quickly go over the 6 sessions that we had and the discussions, some of the topics, and we'll just go from there.
Yeah, so we had 6 90-minute sessions, and to start, we started with courageous conversations and talked about, you know, it wasn't going to be easy to talk about the things that we were talking about, so we had a protocol for that. We started with the 4 agreements: staying engaged, experiencing the discomfort of the conversations that was being had, speaking your truth, and accept that there wasn't going to be closure for this, because these are long and hard conversations, and sometimes you might not get that closure that you want. Defining equity, and one of the best things that came from these for me was the large group discussions that we had. With the variety of people there in the large group discussions, it was very impactful to hear from others about their lived experiences and some of the situations that they dealt with also. There were 3 questions, 5 tables and group discussions. How did your experience impact you? In what ways can educational systems keep students from hate or discrimination? And what changes could be made in New Prague area schools that would have the biggest impact to increase inclusion, marginalized, or underrepresented students? Those are just some of the large and hard conversations that we had during our first session. Second session, we talked about the dimensions of equity, small group discussions, and just talking about going back from our first meeting. We always went back and talked about what we did from our last meetings. Perception and education, large group discussions where we broke up into groups, and there was always a mix at each group with somebody from each of the 5 groups at tables. Dimensions of racial equity and defining those dimensions is also something that we talked about. Session 3, avoiding racial equity detours. Racism was real. We watched videos and had discussions after those small groups took place, utilizing the courageous conversations where people were able to speak their truth and talk about how it was impactful and what they learned and the knowledge they gained from the videos. Session 4, this is where we started to create our desired live experience. What has impacted your role in either the New Prague area schools or your community you live or work in? We had large group discussions. We talked about the dimensions of equity, our unconscious bias, our equity and justice, and district. And then we also talked about the district equity statement for our school district. Educational equity, I think that was one of the big topics as far as talking about what we want, what does equity look like in education. And educational equity means that every student has access to the educational resources and rigor they need at the right moment in their education across race, gender, ethnicity, language, disability, sexual orientation, family background, or family income. And after that, we moving forward what our daily lived experience needs from community-wide equity, and then we discuss those. Session 5, this is where we started to really put together part 2 of our lived experience. And we talked about, we really went into deep detail about how our own culture plays a part in our role as far as being on the task force or in our everyday interactions. A large group discussion about that also. And then how does our deep culture influence our behaviors, values, and thoughts and feelings in every day? So we were able to reflect on that. What values or unspoken beliefs did you learn learn growing up that you probably still have now that are influencing what you do every day? Strategic equity planning, desired lived experience, and that's where we had our large group discussions. Session 6, this is where we put it all together to have an action plan. Equity plan, desired lived experience, our action steps where we believe, and then with the we believe, it's what do we believe that we're going to look forward to, or what we believe that the action steps should be. So we did, each group had a we believe for students, community, parents, and what commitment were we going to make from taking the steps forward after these sessions. So we had the purpose, the preparation, and persistence. So moving forward, what is your commitment area for ongoing equity was our final question. What are we continue to do the work to move forward and help our kids here in New Prague be successful?
So over the course of the last 3 sessions, the task force worked hard on the following 3 areas. As Tremaine said, we want to make sure that we heard many voices, and the discussions that we had, as Tremaine talked about, were very outstanding. And once we just get done with our presentation, we'll be able to take some questions and maybe give you some specific examples. But the big 3 areas taken away were the belief statements. And again, as Tremaine said, just the different groups kind of saying, we believe in this. and then we would write those down and talk about them. The desired lived experiences, what people would like to see on a daily basis. Each group came up with some desired experiences that they believe should be seen on a daily basis. I really would like to point out the students, and I think the people here tonight that were part of that, to see our students talk and communicate and to actually get adults talking with the kids was probably one of the most outstanding things that I saw over the 6 sessions. It was a lot of fun to see our adults and our students working together, just talking. What would you like school to be like? What do you think a good daily experience would be when you come to school? What's a welcome environment look like? And then 3 steps in achieving success, or kind of action steps. So as we leave here, what are some action steps that we as a school community can work on? And those were the things that we talked about in those last 2 sessions. So moving forward, it kind of brings us back to the very beginning. I would just like to just quickly kind of say, under the direction of Superintendent Dittburner, the 3 goals, number 1 being the community task force, is what we're here for. And we just really wanted to let everyone know that over the past year, there was a lot of dialogue, there was a lot of learning, there was knowledge. Dr. Martina Wagner was the person that helped move us through that. There was a good, rich discussion, and from a lot of different people. So that was a positive thing. The school district climate task force, I would say, was very much a success for what Superintendent Dittburner wanted, and that was to bring people together to talk about not only just what's going on in our school community, but just also in community in general. And that's why one of the groups of 5 people was someone who did not have any ties to the school. A little bit of update from the professional development and resources for our students. We continue to work on PD within our buildings. We continue to work on PD as a district also, and that will definitely be something. I mean, having sat in all of the superintendent interviews today, lots of discussion, lots of questions in the area of equity and inclusion, so that will continue. And then the student leadership, just a couple things that have been really good, and I know Turbane's been very involved in speaking to different athletic teams and activities. And then also something we're both a part of also is we have about 25 to 35 kids once a month on Wednesday during the high school late start. They come in early, and we have different presenters every week, people from the community, and our schools who talk on different areas of leadership. And that's been a really well-rounded group of people and lots of good discussion with students with that too. So I just wanted to emphasize the 3 areas that were drawn up by Superintendent Dittburner, and we're here tonight to just kind of let you know that the Climate Task Force has met 6 times, and we feel that there's been a lot of good discussion and movement with that. So at this time, as I said, Miss Anna Shalene to our left here is a high school senior, and she was part of this. We had invited another student also, and he was had to be gone tonight because of a family commitment. But at this time, any of us, or Mark or Denny, if they've got any comments, we will do the best that we could to answer any of the questions that you may have.
I don't have a question. I'd just like to comment to how impressed I was at all the kids that took place in it, because it wouldn't have been possible unless we got real world experience from them and what they see. So I just want to thank all of them, because they're the ones that were the bravest in my mind to come up there and talk to people about it, because it can't be easy to be a kid and talk about some of that stuff.
I feel that we've accomplished the goals that Superintendent has put forth as far as the reason for this committee, and I think it gives us a nice guidance to keep on going and to keep on working towards better better atmospheres and better types of work at our schools between what we had before to what we will have in the future.
My question's for Tremaine, Ashley. So I know that we've kind of moved past this first piece, right? We had the community task force, and Tim had laid out these, 3 criteria. I guess my question for Tremaine is, where do we go from here? What is the work that you're going to be working on going forward? What are your goals here for the next, I don't want to go too far into the future, but maybe your goals for the next, remaining of the school year at this point, or in going into the next year? What's some of the work you're going to be doing?
I just think taking the action steps that we receive from the task force and trying to implement them into the school and seeing what our students wanted. I think really listening to, hearing what our students are asking for and developing a plan to give them what they need in their schools to be successful. I also think continuing to have those expectations and have these conversations. It needs to happen often, and it's been happening, and I can see a difference from being here a year ago to this year. It's been much better, and it's not just about the race part of it. It's just about people gaining the knowledge of what equity is. When we say equity, I think a lot of people go straight to race, but it's just not all about the race part of it. It's making sure all our kids here have the resources they need to be successful. Some have more than others, and we got to give the ones who don't those extra resources to be helpful, and that's what I'm going to try to do. Making sure our teachers have the understanding of getting the professional development, because equity is changing. It changes every day. So just allowing our teachers and our staff to get the professional development, to know and understand what's going on, to be able to build those positive relationships with our students so they can have that connection and be able to hear what our kids are asking for and what they need. As adults, sometimes we can be on different pages, but our kids are here every day, and we need to be on the page that they're on, and we need to listen to what they're asking for and what they're needing. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm still doing that and hearing what our kids are saying, and continue to have open lines of communication and do the work to help all the kids here be successful.
I have a question.
Yep.
The students were taken as a volunteer? The students volunteered to be on this climate task force?
Yeah, so there was an application process for everybody, and then students were selected, parents were selected, staff were selected, and yeah, so.
Can I ask why? Can I ask why you applied for this?
Yeah, so excuse me. I applied for this because I felt it was really important as a whole, because I feel our community has one direction that has been going. Our own opinions stay the same. And with this task force, it would be a chance to find about things. And I'm in quite a few clubs at school and sports, so I can see how and like where they come from out of the task force. Oh, you need to be and talk to people about how they're actually experiencing things. And overall, I had a really great experience. And I think it was really important.
Thank you.
I want to add on to what Tremaine said about the fact that this wasn't really this was not only about race at all. This is about just everybody treating everybody with respect. Like she just said, doesn't matter where you grow up, doesn't matter what sports you're in, or if you're in sports or choir or whatever. I mean, everybody deserves to go to New Prague schools and be treated with respect every day.
And so you talked about recommendations from the task force and implementing them. When are the recommendations from the task force going to be made public? I noticed that they weren't part of the minutes that were released onto the website.
Yeah, so the action steps are actually being typed up now. I'm trying to put them in the form, a usage form, so they can be used with our principals. So that's the next thing, is that we're going to bring that to the principals' meetings. They're going to take those to the leadership teams yet this school year. And then in the summertime, we bring in our leadership teams prior to the start of the school year to talk about building goals. That is also then going to be kind of our kickoff of the action steps that were brought forth to us. We'll have to be a little bit careful with the action steps, and what I mean by that is there are a number of them. Each group made some. So what the leadership teams are going to do is to help us within their own specific building, kind of what Anna spoke of a little bit as a high schooler, and then each of those buildings will be able to take out one or two of the action steps and actually move forward in something that relates to school board goals, superintendent goals, building goals, and leadership goals for our staff within each building.
Will those be sent to all the members of the school board as well?
Absolutely. They'll be public.
And so it's my understanding that Wagner Consulting led this group. Ms. Wagner was responsible for all the trainings, and both on the professional development side as well as the task force. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes.
One of the things that as I've observed this process from the outside, as I've watched it, I've had a little bit of concern with sometimes the inconsistency of some of the stated goals and what the outputs are and what we're actually doing. For example, one of the statements that was in the presentation today was that it was our goal to eliminate racial language in our school district. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes.
And so, for example, in one of the teachers' training, in at least two places, for example, the training that we provided to our teachers said, following Olson's accounting of the detours white people follow to protect their privilege and avoid the messy work of racial justice. Would that be considered racial language in the context of our equity program in this district?
Can you read that again?
Following?
Slowly.
I'm sorry, I
That's
talk
okay.
fast.
Slowly.
Following Olson's accounting of the detours white people follow to protect their privilege and avoid the messy work of racial justice, I call these initiatives and strategies equity detours. Would we consider that racial language in our equity program?
Well, equity detour is a big word for making sure that we as teachers and educators, if there's a roadblock in the way of a student learning, we want to try and avoid that as best as possible.
I understand that. And so I understand the principle of equity detours. My question is, in that training we provided our teachers, it talked about white teachers doing things, and it talked about white people doing things. Do we consider that racial language? I understand equity detours, that's a separate definition. Is that racial language in the context of our equity program?
I don't think so. Just, I'm saying that because we're working with predominantly white teachers.
So, okay, that's an interesting take on it. So, calling teachers out by their race wouldn't be considered racial language in our equity programs.
Well, to say that we have an equity program might be a little bit deep. We were starting with professional development. So whatever direction we're trying to go with this, we're trying to do the best that we can. There was one article which you're calling out, and that article talked about racial detours, educational detours for our kids. So that was one piece of professional development in an article that did bring up some concern with a few people, and we did the very best that we could with that to try and show why the article was chosen and to move forward from that. And again, that's why I started with what the definition of what the equity detour was to just simply say if there's something that is in the way, which teachers do every day, that would kind of detour a student from learning, that we want to identify that, fix it, and move forward.
All right. And
You
so
offended to be called a white person, or what are you getting at here, Dan?
what I'm saying is if we say we want to eliminate racial language, using racial language as part of our training is a problem.
I think you're worrying about things a little bit too much.
And so I also have some other interesting things that I think are important to look at as we talk about our equity programs in our schools. And so, for example, in our teacher development training, there's legitimate reasons to disagree with some of the content of the training that was provided. And in the training that we claimed was foundational to our district, we said that educators who resist anti-racist measures should feel uneasy, isolated, on the outskirts of their schools, institutions, cultures. I mean this literally. The educators least invested in racial equity should wonder why they belong. And so if our teachers disagree with some of the principles of this article, do we believe that they do not belong in our school districts and they should feel unwelcome?
No, I think that would be a little bit of a stretch. And again, the article, I'll just reference this for everybody. So Dr. Wagner, professional in this area, which we asked to help us to lead as a school district, because we felt that we definitely needed some type of direction for our school district and our staff. So the one article, you have to remember that's all adults there. There are trained educators who have all 4-year degrees, and they read many, many professional articles. Sometimes you agree with some of the things, sometimes you don't. So this professional article was chosen to talk about, which I will say again, is the education detour. It started out with the very first paragraph, which, Dan, you're talking about, which could offend some people or maybe be taken differently. We read that in the community task force also and had actually a very good discussion about that. We didn't really get as much time with the professionals, the professional teachers that day, but yeah, so no, that isn't anything. There was nobody that's going to judge how a person thinks. It's very clear and evident when our teachers come to work. They are there to do the very best that they can for their students, regardless of what their thoughts or opinions are. They're educators. They come to work. They do a great job. They do the best that they possibly can.
One of the equity detours that's really at the crux of the article states that the only way to redistribute access and opportunity is to prioritize the interests of students of color. Remember that in an inequitable context, equality, attending equally to everyone's interests, reproduces inequality.
Dan, if you really have this big of an issue, then I suggest we put it on a work session and we talk about it there. We don't need to sit here and listen to this. We'll talk to it. We'll talk about it at a work session then.
I think it's important.
Those are detours that do happen, but looking at the article, I mean, I got plenty of phone calls about the article and conversation. It was a very hard article to read. But at the time, when you dig deep like that, we're not looking at the article to implement all those things that were being talked about into our school. New Prague doesn't need all those things, but we did want to look at it to see if some of those things in the articles were barriers keeping our kids from being successful. And a lot of those things in there you might not agree with, but those things are real life things that are happening in our schools. Maybe not here, but those are things that are real. It's not made up. So looking at those things and gaining knowledge from that article, that's why I read, is to gain knowledge. I might not agree with everything that I read at times, but if it can give me some knowledge to be better and help these kids be successful, and I don't have to take every step that's in that article, then that's what I'm going to do. And to have a conversation like this also, I mean, these are conversations that need to be had, but if we can look at these things and find ways for our kids to be successful, then that's what we need to do. And I'm sure there's going to be other things that we do or say that are going to be judged, but we got to make the best choices for our kids, and we don't have to do everything exactly what was being said in that article.
And you've got to take it in the correct context too.
Yeah.
If you take single things out of there and point them out as being the main parts of it and the main reason for it, that's not keeping it in context. The context is that we want teachers, and if they use the word white teachers, I'm sad that they did, because all teachers, whatever race they are, have to give the students the same equal type of treatment, no matter where their origin is or what their background is. So I see where you are coming from, but I disagree with it because you're taking it out of context and you're picking out one thing and making that a big issue, and it's not. That was just terminology that probably I would not have used myself if I would have written it, but they did, and that's the way it is.
I think also if you take certain bits and pieces out of things that bother you and you have a conversation about it, that's what this is all about, is to put these things out there and have a conversation and understand and disagree and figure out how to disagree and then move on. The fact that you're looking at something and disagreeing with it is a good thing. It is what this is all about. It is hearing different voices. It is that. And so to take those things out of there and to stop that conversation, I think is exactly the opposite of what we should be doing.
Yeah, and this was a report about a task force. I was there. I don't even know what you're talking about. So how can we sit here and get anywhere?
So I appreciate all that, and I'll kind of close with one thought, right? And the reason it's so concerning to me, right, we talk about, like, we just want to have a conversation. We're not going to adopt everything, right? And if we say our stated effort is to remove racial language, to treat everybody the best we can to help them maximize their potential, which I agree with that stated goal of maximizing everybody's potential, and that doesn't mean every individual gets treated the same. It means that you adapt your teaching styles, you adapt opportunities for them, right?
That's the definition of equity.
Right. But when we say we should do it on the basis of race, when we say that, I read the entire article, I understand the context of the article very well. I read it multiple times, right? We're introducing things that I think are exactly opposite of our stated goals in our equity, in our climate task force, and our equity efforts with some of the items that were brought in by Wagner Consulting. And that makes me question a lot of the other training that was done. And so I think when somebody says, uses racial language, that should be a red flag for everybody, regardless of what it is. Saying
It was a bad choice of words. It was a bad choice of words, and
it was
if
intentional.
You dwell on that,
it was an intentional choice of words
no,
by the article writer. I guarantee it.
No, it was not.
I guarantee
You're
it was
paranoid.
intentional.
You can't guarantee anything you weren't there.
Cannot guarantee
Period.
it. You weren't even there.
You weren't there. We have people who were there, people
and
telling
you
what
could
they heard.
substitute all teachers. How about if you throw out the white teachers and just say all teachers and leave it at that?
This person has a PhD, I believe, in their topic. They do this for a living on this subject.
They picked an
Their
article.
language is intentional. The writer of the article, right? And so when we introduce racial language in our training and our teaching and things like that, that is exactly the opposite of what we say we're doing.
It's exactly what we should be doing. The conversation that they had around this is exactly the conversation you want. The fact that you can sit here and say, I disagree with this, is exactly the conversation we want, period. You're not going to get what you want. I'm not going to get what I want. Lots of people are not going to get what they want. It's the conversation that's good. And to take out controversial issues because you don't want them talking about, I think that's exactly the opposite of what equity does.
I think they should be talked about and universally condemned. Racism is always wrong whenever it is done, always.
Want to universally condemn people for what they believe. Really? That's what you're saying.
You're going to defend racism
No,
and say
I'm
that
saying,
racism is not
I'm
universally
saying you're
wrong?
the one who always says that we have a right to say whatever we want. We have a First Amendment right. And now you're
Well,
saying
that
we should
person has
condemn
the right to
that.
say it.
Right. They have
Don't believe
condemn
it.
that.
Look past it.
Say it out loud.
Get
They
past
condemn
it.
that.
All right, guys.
They have a right to say it,
We're good.
but I would not include it in my
All right,
curriculum
we're done
if
with
it's
it.
racism.
I think thank you very much for coming
Yes.
forward and speaking. I think there was a lot of things that are positive of what the work that you guys have done and will continue to do. And yes, thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Please continue to share your successes.
There you go.
I'd
And
like to hear
keep
'em.
using this as a roadmap to continue to make our school a better, equitable school.
We appreciate you.
I do want to just comment and just say thank you to Anna Shalene for being here. We have a bright future for people in this world because of students like her and the other young people that we had there. I wish they all could have been here, but some great conversations, and I learned a lot as an adult. I know that in a very safe place. But thank you, Anna, very much for
Thank
being
you,
here
Anna.
tonight.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jermaine.
All right, we're going to move into the action items portion of our agenda. First thing on the agenda here is the approval of the high school band and choir trip. I know at the last work session we had a presentation on that. I don't have any other further questions on it. I know it's a trip to Nashville. I know that attendance, they have to start raising funds and things like that right now, so.
Make a motion to
Okay.
approve the
Second.
trip.
First and second, any further discussion? All right, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, motion carries. All right, the next item was something that was pulled out of the consent agenda. It's the second reading of policy 512 regarding school-sponsored student publications and activities. Dan, I think you pulled this out of the consent agenda?
That is correct.
Okay. Any comments regarding this?
Yes, I do. All right, before the board votes to approve the latest review of Policy 512 and 904, I ask that the members reconsider. We have a responsibility to maintain an education environment free from material and substantial disruptions of normal school activity. I agree that the schools must be orderly locations where all student, teachers, parents, and administrators have a responsibility to contribute in a positive manner to the environment and culture in the schools. In order to maintain an orderly environment, some believe that it is okay to punish students and groups that have not done anything wrong. When the learning environment is being disrupted, our moral and legal responsibility is to stop whoever is guilty of being disruptive. Our policies give our administrators vast leeway in identifying speech that does not belong in our schools, including it is obscene to minors, it is libelous or slanderous, it advertises or promotes any product or service not permitted by minors by law, it encourages students to commit illegal acts or violate school regulations, it expresses or advocates sexual, racial, or religious harassment or violence or prejudice, it is distributed or displayed in violation of time, place, and manner regulations. These categories are very broad and encompassing that any supporter of this policy as written, I would challenge any supporter of this policy as written to give an example of something that could be said to be under this policy and that does not violate one of these categories, but if someone heard it, it would be reasonable for them to disrupt the learning environment. That was a terrible sentence. It is wrong to punish those who have not done wrong, to spare those causing the problems the consequences of their actions. It may seem easier for us to avoid confronting those who are willing to disrupt our schools through actions that violate our policies and handbooks. Long term, it isn't. We compromise our morals, policies, and teach our children that the way to get what you want is to break the rules. I encourage us to reconsider these policies and take out the portion that says if people react poorly, that can be grounds for removing whatever activity would otherwise be permitted.
I disagree.
And we just,
How do we move forward? Make a motion, read it, or?
no, all we need is, it's an approval at this point. So if there's any other comments, I would entertain a motion to.
So move.
Second.
Been first and seconded. Any other comments? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Next on the agenda item is the second reading of policy 904. This was also pulled out by Dan
Ditto.
on what you just said?
Yep.
Okay. Any other comments?
Could I have one example? Give me an example of why we should pull this out.
So, for example, if I said I like red and it's my favorite color, and somebody said I don't like that and they punched me in the face, that would be grounds for me not being able to speak, right? If the administration decided to alleviate the issue that way. I believe that if the speech does not violate one of the categories that we've set up and people have an adverse reaction to that, their adverse reaction is the problem, not the person who said something otherwise permitted by our policy.
Can I jump? Is that okay? Sure. Can you give an example of something more tangible? Can you give an example of something that if we put the policy in place, what kind of speech that would stop?
Right, and so I think it leaves it at the discretion of the administration, for example.
No, I want an example. I want an example of a student.
So when there's an issue, right? So let's say a student club wants to show a movie after the meeting, or let's say they wanted to invite Turning Point USA, right?
I don't know what that is.
It's a conservative group that comes and gives speeches on schools, right? So let's say somebody said they wanted to do that. And let's say there was another group that said they did not want that in our schools, and they held a sit-in and refused to go to class until the administration agreed not to do that. Under our policy, we say it's legitimate for the administration to say, since the kids are refusing to go to class with this other group who's going to hold a non-mandatory meeting that they don't like, it's okay for us to say that meeting can't be held because it's disrupting the learning environment. And I'm saying the proper place for the administration to focus is on the kids who are not going to class for an otherwise, because they do not like an otherwise permitted activity, for example.
You're making a hypothetical.
Sounds to me like you need to try to get licensed in education then.
It
I
sounds
mean,
like
we
you're
already
making
went through this policy. We're not gonna tear it apart again. I move we approve it.
I
You're
would like
making,
to
you're
hear
making
Danny.
a hypothetical example out of something that we don't know would happen. You're saying that this would happen. How do we know that this is just your logic that's bringing this?
It's illogical.
The important part of policy, I think, is setting clear guidelines of what we expect the administrators to do before there's an actual issue, right? Because when you look at the policy, you're saying, when an actual case comes up, I don't want us trying to wade through the policy and realize that it's not solid and clear. I want us to say that we should deal with the activity if it violates one of the reasons why we say it's unacceptable, and we should guide our administration to deal with people who are disrupting if the activity that the other students are participating in meets our standards.
This policy already went through the policy committee.
It went through the policy committee, and now
I say we vote on it. I call the question. Let's vote. Let's move on.
And we use MSBA for our boilerplate for
Yes.
this, right?
For this one, yes,
Yes.
yes.
So this is MSBA.
We always follow
Approved.
MSBA.
And it's been approved by attorneys, yeah, that's right, over the
I
years.
second call the question.
It's been first and seconded. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries.
Vote on the motion now.
All right. Next on the agenda item here is the early retirement incentive. Sandy, you'll present this to us.
Hi, Sandy.
Okay, good evening. This is a follow-up from a presentation I gave a month ago, is it? I kind of lose track of time, but I think that I probably didn't explain it well enough as far as the cost savings potential over many years. And so I just wanted to bring it back and hopefully, get it approved tonight, or I suppose it could even happen tomorrow night. We do have a board meeting tomorrow night, but just want to go over this again. First of all, I would not bring this forward for discussion if we weren't doing budget adjustments, and that's the reason I'm bringing it forward. And some teachers will not need to be replaced because we are going to be reducing FTEs, and some teachers will need to be replaced due to licensure requirements, and some of those may be hard to fill. There's no doubt about that. Special ed, some of the higher high school type requirements may be hard to fill. We do have this OPEB levy, other post-retirement employee benefits, and we could levy for this, and funds would be received 2 years after the expenditures, and that decision to levy for these expenses can be made when the levies are certified. So for instance, if we have expenses this year under this early retirement incentive, we would make the payments before June 30th. We would put it on our 2024 levy, which is revenue for 24-25. So it's a lag, but those decisions can be made, in December when we certify the final levy. And right now, I've been following a lot of legislation. I'm not sure what a chance it has, but we're hoping that some legislation will lower all tax burdens for our district taxpayers in future years through the equalization formula mainly. Listened to a couple of bills. They got, good support in the finance committee. It went to the tax committee. Obviously, that has to be part of the target, even though the income for schools doesn't change. It takes some money away from from education, just because of the aid levy mix. So, whether or not it's going to end up, I don't know. And this is the proposed early retirement incentive, staff with 20 or more years of service and at least 50 years old at the end of the school year. 45 staff currently qualify. It would be a $35,000 incentive paid over 2 years into a post-retirement HRA plan. That can be used for health insurance premiums or healthcare expenses on a tax-free basis. So it's tax-free going in and tax-free going out. We would prorate for an FTE. And right now, the way I see it, to ensure overall district savings, a minimum of 7 teachers would have to sign up for it. pay it over 2 years. The amount of money we will save will be dependent on how many take it, the staff that's leaving, what their medical insurance costs are, and also the replacement step lane and benefits. There's no way I can just use averages. I can't use specifics because we don't know who might take it and who might replace them. And just pointed out last time that new hires have averaged a BA 45 step 5. So, we think we hire a BA 0 all the time, but that's not always true. So I have to use a higher number in order to figure out the cost savings. And while 1 year savings might not be that high, savings will occur over multiple years. And I think that's the piece that I missed the last time. So we really need to balance the risk of replacing hard to fill positions with potential budget savings. And budget savings will save teacher jobs. There's no doubt about that. If we, have some teachers that retire, we can save more jobs because that's a higher salary leaving, and we can save one of our newer teachers. So this is a busy chart, but just looking at the multi-year savings scenarios, maybe you can look at that bottom one, 7 teachers with 5 replaced. You can see we'd have some costs in 22-23 of $122,500, and also next year because it would be split into 2 years. We could levy the tax dollars. We'd get some back in 24-25 and some back in 25-26. I look at the retiring packages for 7 teachers, and I age that because every year their salary would go up. Rehiring 5 teachers, again, every year that salary would go up. So the net loss, a net gain with the levy over a period of the 5 years starting this year would be almost 1.9 million. Without the levy, it would be 1.6 million. So you can't just look at that first year, even though the first year the savings don't look that big. It is a multi-year process. Now, the new hires that we hire obviously will advance on the salary schedule each year, so we'll hit another height of the teacher salary earlier than we would have, but the budget savings is real over the next few years. So that is, and I did, several scenarios over 5 years. Again, we need board approval. I have an MOU drafted that New Prague Ed Minnesota has initially approved, and then if it's approved, we'll communicate with eligible teachers. So any questions or comments, please?
Would you give a range, Sandy, for the savings? I know you could give an average or whatever, but what would be the least amount of savings and what would be the greatest? Could you give a range?
Yeah, so if 7 teachers took it and we had to replace all 7, because that's a possibility. I mean, depends upon who takes it, right? Over the next, from fiscal year 22-23 to 26-27, if we did not levy for the costs, the savings would be almost $1 million. Again, that's over 4 or 5 years. If we have to replace 6 of them, it's 1.3 million, and 5 of them, it's 1.6 million. Again, that's over several years.
1 million to 1.6.
And that's actually without, I'll be honest, I initially was against this. And
Yep.
so, because I was like, well, we're only gonna save $300,000, and that's even if we have to go levy for this money, and so are we really truly saving the taxpayer any money? Because at the end of the day, I think that's kind of the idea that we're trying to do here, trying to make budget cuts and actually save the taxpayer some taxpayer dollars. So now seeing this, even if we don't levy for this, I'm just gonna throw that hypothetical out there, even if we have 7 teachers replace 7 without the levy, we still save almost $1 million because of that difference, that gap over the next 5 years. And of course, there's a risk that these teachers would have retired anyhow when we spent,
right,
$240,000, but I think that's not necessarily the case. So I guess seeing this, I appreciate you putting this together because it changed my mind on it. Because originally I was like, why are we just spending money to flip it and levy for this money? And so this helped me.
And this is not a new idea.
Right.
We've
right.
done this before in
Yeah.
our district,
was-
and other districts have done it in other parts of the
And we
state.
did it 10 years ago, and it was 20,000 for the 1 year.
Sure.
I just, she put this together, and you see the big picture, you got to think, these budget cuts, I know, of course, I'll be giving you recommendations at the end of next month on budget adjustments. We got to get, right now, we're looking at 3.1 million, trying to get there. This isn't really about that. I mean, what is it, 50,000 or whatever it is?
Yeah.
But you got to think long-term and in regards to the budget, because I don't care what the state gives us, we have to think long-term on this thing.
And it's a win-win too, for the teachers that are on the, fence and deciding, well, should I or shouldn't I? It gives them a little boost to say, I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to get a few more years of retirement and take the district up on this. So it's a win for them. It's a win for us
And
as well.
we might not get 7.
Yeah, you might not get them. Yeah, that's
So.
true.
And we would only do this if it was 7.
Yeah, I mean, some districts, if they haven't gotten the minimum number, because sometimes that happens, they certainly can look at the situation and bring it back to the board for further review, and could potentially, if the union went for it and you went for it, we could move forward. But again, that would have to depend on the unique circumstances.
So right now, we would only be approving today if it was 7, and then if we wanted to go back and say, hey, it was 6 teachers want to take us up on this, the savings would still be 800 grand.
Right.
You still can say, let's
Right.
change our mind, let's do it with 6.
Right, this
So-
takes the risk out of, having those 7 teachers retire and having to replace 7, and the savings aren't as great because we had to pay more because of the licensure requirements. So
Yeah.
it's a kind of a safe harbor, if you will.
So one of the problems of having to replace teachers is it's my understanding that it's hard to get teachers currently, and so is there a cap on the total number of people that could take it? It's my understanding there's 45 eligible. Let's say 12 took it. Is that is there any upside cap where we say we wouldn't go beyond that number of teachers?
I have not put a cap on it. I don't think that will be an issue. And I know you asked about it last time. We certainly could put a cap on it. I just don't think that's going to be an issue. And if the right teachers take it, that would be a good thing for us.
And then I have a little bit of concern with the 5-year projection, just based on the principle of, if I was gonna do the teachers start collecting their retirement in the first year of retiring it, or do they have to wait for the 2 years before they start collecting it? When do they start getting their retirement benefit?
I mean, their TRA or their
Their pension, whatever
they can choose to take that whenever they want.
So they'd be eligible for their pension at age 50. If they were at 50, for example, when they started, they could start taking their pension at whatever
Age
percentage
50,
they're
I
eligible
don't think
for.
so, no. So they would have to wait till their retirement age to take it, and some teachers will buy their credits. And so that's always an option for them. We've had teachers do that before. But no, they couldn't start taking it yet.
What is the current retirement age for the pension, that for the group we're looking at, 66?
Full retirement
Well,
is at 66 right now.
66 full retirement, but with rule of 90, it all depends the
Well,
age.
Rule of 90 isn't in anymore. The original Rule of 90, there is
Yes.
some talk at the legislature and the pension fund of kind of putting in a new Rule of 90 that would make people potentially eligible at age 60.
Yeah, the original one sunsetted.
Yes, it's sunsetted, yeah.
But Dan, that's not going to cost us any more money necessarily.
No,
Let's-
that's not money out of our pocket.
So it goes to the likelihood. So if I was going to retire anyway, I would give up 2 years of my income in order to take the extra sweetener. But if I'm not getting my pension income replaced, who's going to quit 5 years early when they're not getting any income if they're not already on their way out the door? So the
if they
5-year
wanna take it-
projection is my concern if they're not drawing pension.
Right, that's why we're not sure if we're going to get 7, and they could get another job.
And they could work in the private sector.
Yeah,
Some-
private sector, that's
We've gotten some teachers that decide to work at the private sector and in the private sector, and then they would wait to draw their retirement doesn't go anywhere. It's still there for them.
Yeah, it just goes to whether or not I think the 5-year projections are likely to be realized based upon if they don't have their replacement income, or if they want to leave for the private sector anyway. I think they're likely to do that, especially in the current education environment. So,
But there's
that's
a
just
lot.
my
There's
thought.
a lot of circumstances, though. I mean, like their spouse could be working, and so that's enough. They're not doing it for the money. They can live. You know what I mean? There still might be. There's a lot of hypotheticals.
reasons,
We
it
could go
could be,
through
you
millions
know.
of hypotheticals on this one.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed ERI.
Second.
it's been first and second. Any other comments? All right. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. right. The next item up is the resolution to accept a donation from Medtronic.
Yeah, we actually have three of them, but Medtronic is the first one. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to consider the resolution of a donation from Medtronic.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Whereas the school board may accept a gift valued at $1,000 or more only by adoption of a resolution by 2/3 of its members, and whereas Medtronic wishes to donate $1,000 towards the 4th and 5th grade classes at Raven Stream, now therefore be it resolved, the New Prague Area School Board of Education shall accept the donation under no conditions. How do you vote on this, Karen?
Can I ask a question first?
Sure.
Is this from a grant?
Or
Or they
It's
just,
from the company, Medtronic.
From the, it's a matching grant.
Medtronic
Oh, got
is-
it.
We have
Matching
is
grant.
a
a
company
grandfather
that-
so
that,
somebody, okay, yeah, I vote yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Mike, I'm sorry, Mark.
Yes.
Brother.
Called
Kim,
worse.
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Dennis, yes, item passes 7-0. And then we have another donation, and this one is from Steve Mooney. Do I have a
Missed one.
motion to consider this
So
resolution?
move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to consider the following resolution. Whereas the school board may accept a gift valued at $1,000 or more only by adoption of a resolution by 2/3 of its members, whereas Steve Mooney wishes to donate a car valued at approximately $2,500 to the Automotive Industrial Technology Program at the high school. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the New Prague Area School Board that it shall accept the donation under no conditions. How do you vote on this, Dan?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Dennis, yes. Item passes 7-0.
This is fabulous.
And the third one is a resolution to accept the donation from Clinton Kopicus. How do you vote on, I'm sorry, do you have a motion to consider
move.
this resolution?
Second.
It's been
Second.
moved and seconded to consider the following resolution. Whereas Clinton Kopicus wishes to donate $1,000 toward the 4th and 5th grade classes at Raven Stream, now therefore be it resolved by the New Prague Area Board of Education to accept the donation under no circumstances. How do you vote on this, Karen?
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Dennis, yes. Item passes 7-0. And thank you to the donors.
All right, excellent. The next item, we have a memorandum of understanding for the therapy dog owner agreement. Do we have any presentation on this at all? Or
no,
any?
we have a sick person.
Okay, so,
Should
It
we
is
table
what
it? Should we table it, or?
Well, it's nothing, it's same.
We've
following
done
the
it
same,
in several other
procedures.
ones.
it's just re-upping it from the
Yep.
Oh,
last
so
year.
we have it, so we're just.
Oh, yeah, we've already hit.
Okay, so it's not a new
Signing
one.
the
It's the
annual
same
agreement.
agreement we've had with the other ones you've approved.
I'll make a motion to consider or to pass the memorandum of understanding for the therapy dog.
Second.
Been first and seconded. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. All right, and then the last item we have here is a grant from New Prague Area Education Foundation. And this is not a resolution, right?
No,
So we
it's not
just-
a resolution.
So we just need I need a motion to.
So move.
Okay. Been
Second.
First and second. Any discussion on this? All right, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. And then last, I'd accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Been first and seconded. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.